Imagine, you've been waiting for years for a blockbuster movie to finally release in your country.
Oh, yeah. Like everyone else is talking about it online.
Exactly. You see all the trailers, you read the reviews from overseas, and you know the visual effects are just groundbreaking. But because of, I don't know, regional distribution rules, you just cannot see it.
Right, which is incredibly frustrating.
It is. But now, take that exact same scenario of endless waiting, but instead of a movie, it's a life-saving, FDA-approved cancer dog.
Wow, yeah. That is a completely different stakes level.
Right. And instead of the cost being a missed cultural moment, the cost of waiting is literally your life, or, your fundamental quality of life.
Yeah, and in health economics, that harrowing reality has a name. It's known as drug lag.
Drug lag.
Right. It is the systemic delay between a medical breakthrough being approved in one part of the world and then, successfully navigating the regulatory red tape to become available in another.
And for patients living in places like, say, Southeast Asia or Oceania, drug lag can mean agonizing years of waiting.
Yeah, just sitting there while local regulatory agencies basically duplicate clinical trials and churn through mountains of paperwork.
Exactly. But today, we are looking at a stack of incredibly detailed research on a place that has, basically found a cheat code for this entire problem.
They really have. It's fascinating.
We are taking a deep dive into China's Boao Lecheng International Medical Tourism Pilot Zone in Hainan.
Yeah, and it's highly appropriate that they have often referred to it as Hope City.
Hope City, yeah. I like that.
Our mission today is to unpack how this tiny, I think it's just 9.96 square kilometer zone has completely eliminated the wait time for global medical breakthroughs.
Which sounds impossible, but we'll get into it.
Right, but we also have to map out the intense, almost unbelievable logistical maze that international patients must navigate just to step foot inside it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I first started reading these sources, I couldn't quite wrap my head around the scale of it all.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in at first.
It really is. I initially thought, we're just talking about a single hospital that added, a fancy VIP wing for foreigners or something.
Oh, far from it. Boao Lecheng is actually currently the only jurisdiction in China legally authorized to use globally approved drugs and devices.
Meaning like FDA or EMA-approved, right?
Exactly. FDA or EMA-approved, but domestically unregistered top-tier treatments. And they execute this with literally zero time lag.
Zero time lag. But before we get into the futuristic medicine, we really have to look at the physical blueprint of this place.
Yeah, the physical scale is staggering.
Because the State Council originally approved this back in 2013 with something called the National 9 Articles.
Right, which was a pretty massive top-down strategic move.
Yeah. It gave them 4 special permissions covering medical technology, research, foreign investment, and international exchanges.
And the urban planning really reflects that ambition, too. They instituted this strict rule called 3 lows, 1 high.
3 lows, 1 high. Walk me through that.
So the lows refer to a low plot ratio, low density, and critically low building height.
Right.
Construction in most areas there is strictly capped at 24 meters.
I loved the detail in the source about that 24-meter cap.
Oh, about the trees.
Yeah. It was chosen because it's exactly the average height of a local Hainan coconut tree.
It's such a specific, cool detail.
I mean, they essentially hid a multi-billion-dollar medical hub inside a forest canopy.
They did. And that brings us to the 1 high, which is a high greening rate.
Right. They kept the nature intact.
Exactly. They intentionally preserved the surrounding river, island, and forest ecosystems. As a result, the PM 2.5 air quality index stays around a pristine 5-year round.
Which is incredibly clean. But, I do have to push back on the geography here a little bit.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, you have this massive hub for cutting-edge oncology, rare diseases, and advanced cellular therapy.
Right.
Putting it in what essentially sounds like a remote nature reserve feels, a bit counterintuitive.
I can see why you'd think that.
Wouldn't the infrastructure just be vastly superior in the middle of downtown Shanghai or Beijing?
It sounds counterintuitive until you look at the physiological state of the actual people arriving there.
Okay, fair point.
We are talking about patients with severe respiratory diseases or individuals who are, severely immune compromised from heavy chemotherapy.
Oh, right. Or recovering from highly invasive implant surgeries.
Exactly. Dropping those specific patients into a heavily congested, polluted urban center introduces a massive clinical risk of secondary infection.
That makes total sense. So the air isn't just nice, it's medical.
Yeah, the perfect microclimate in Hainan is literally a therapeutic asset. Plus, I mean, it's not actually isolated.
No, it's not.
No, the zone is less than 10 minutes from the Boao airport, and it's deeply integrated into the high-speed rail network.
Ah, okay. And the tourism numbers certainly prove the location isn't a deterrent at all.
Oh, the growth is wild.
It is wild. The zone saw 300,000 medical tourists in 2023. And then by 2024, that jumped almost 37% to over 413,700 people.
Yeah, and with per capita spending exceeding $12,000, I mean, these aren't people dropping in for a weekend wellness massage.
No, definitely not. They've already introduced over 500 special drugs and devices.
But, you know, a pristine environment is wonderful, but beautiful river doesn't cure a tumor.
Right. Policy does.
Exactly. Lecheng functions because they have built two massive structural engines.
Let's break those down.
So there's a financial engine to shatter the cost barrier and a regulatory engine to obliterate the time barrier.
That financial engine revolves around a major policy that just dropped on September 5, 2024.
That was a huge deal.
Massive. It eliminated import duties and completely wiped out the 15 to 30% value-added tax block for unregistered drugs and devices brought into the zone.
Which is staggering. When you consider that high-end medicine is notoriously expensive, that policy is an absolute game changer.
It really is. I mean, it radically alters the math for cross-border healthcare.
Because think about it. If you are a patient flying in from New Zealand or Indonesia, paying entirely out of pocket for an orphan drug or a targeted gene therapy.
The base price is already hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Slapping a 30% tax burden on top of that is completely paralyzing.
Yeah, taking 30 grand off a $100,000 bill is life-changing. Stripping that tax away makes treatments accessible to a much broader tier of patients.
It definitely does.
But logically, I have a question about this.
Sure.
If you wipe out a 30% tax on a $100,000 drug, the incentive for fraud has to be astronomical, right?
Oh, yeah. The gray market risk is huge.
Because someone could easily just fly in, buy a dozen vials of some rare biologic, pack them in a suitcase, and smuggle them out to sell on the gray market back home for a massive profit.
Yeah. And that loophole is exactly why the zone operates a draconian closed-loop system.
Closed loop meaning you can't leave with it.
Right. You cannot just walk into a pharmacy in Lecheng and fill a prescription to go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
These treatments can only be prescribed by a licensed physician at an authorized on-site hospital, and they must be physically administered to the patient within that facility.
So it is strictly for terminal on-site use?
Yes. If a patient or their family attempts to sneak these tax-free drugs out of the zone, the penalty is severe.
Yeah, the sources noted they are hit with a 3-year ban from ever accessing the zone's treatments again.
And the government is fiercely protective of that system because they need absolute assurance that the tax relief is going directly toward clinical survival.
Right, not funding some black market syndicate.
Exactly.
Well, the financial relief is huge, but from reading the sources, the time engine is what actually saves lives.
The time savings are almost unbelievable.
Historically, for a brand new, globally approved drug to get domestic approval by China's National Medical Products Administration, the NMPA, it takes 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years. And for a cancer patient, that's a lifetime.
Literally. But Lecheng has shrunk that window down to between 3 and 7 days.
It's a 90% drop in wait time.
How do they even do that safely?
They achieve it by splitting the bureaucratic load. First, the local health commission conducts a 10-day initial review.
Okay, so a local check first.
Right, followed by a 5-day deep clinical and ethical evaluation to ensure the patient truly has no domestic alternative.
So they make sure you actually need the specific imported drug.
Exactly. Once they clear it, the Drug Administration steps in for a rapid 7-day safety check, simply verifying the drug's track record globally.
And for patients who are critically ill and basically out of time, the zone has a green channel, right?
Yes, the green channel is incredible.
It compresses that entire dual agency approval down to just 3 days.
3 days to legally clear a globally approved, life-saving drug for a specific patient.
It's wild, but you know, to understand the magnitude of that speed, we need to transition from the abstract policy to the actual human impact.
Yeah, the real people benefiting from this.
The research highlights several distinct medical breakthroughs being utilized in Lecheng right now, and the diversity of these treatments is remarkable.
It really spans across so many different medical fields.
Let's start with the hardware side of things. On June 20, 2025, the Nucleus Nexus system was launched in Lecheng.
Right, the new cochlear implant.
Yeah, and 10 patients received the implant on that exact same day. This is a cochlear implant for severe hearing loss, but it represents a total paradigm shift.
Because of the software, right?
Exactly. It's the first implant with upgradable firmware.
To really appreciate why that matters, you have to look at how traditional cochlear implants work.
Right. Explain that for us.
Well, a surgeon basically bypasses the damaged hair cells in the ear and surgically implants a chip directly into the patient's skull to stimulate the auditory nerve.
Which sounds intense on its own.
It is, but the real problem is that hardware is then permanently locked in under the skin.
Oh, man. So you're stuck with it.
Exactly. If the sound processing algorithms improve 5 years later, the patient is stuck with the outdated tech unless they undergo another highly invasive brain surgery.
That sounds terrifying, just knowing your tech is obsolete, but it's inside your head.
Right, but the Nexus system has a smart architecture that allows the internal chip to evolve via software updates.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's basically like buying a smartphone, but the hardware actually upgrades itself while it's inside your head.
That's a great analogy.
For the estimated 10 million people in the APAC region suffering from this level of hearing loss, skipping future surgeries is miraculous.
It really is. And it also stores the patient's customized hearing map internally.
What does that mean for the patient?
So if they accidentally damage or lose their external sound processor, they don't have to fly back to a specialized hospital for complex weeks-long recalibrations.
Wow.
Yeah, they just sync a new external piece directly to the internal chip.
That hardware breakthrough is incredible. But what about treatments where the barrier isn't the technology, but the unbearable side effects of traditional drugs?
Yeah, the dermatological cases.
Right. This brings us to a vitiligo treatment called Opzelura. Vitiligo is an autoimmune disease that causes the skin to lose its pigment.
And the research goes out of its way to note the profound psychological devastation this causes.
Especially for patients living in the hot climates of Oceania and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, where covering up skin year-round with long sleeves just isn't practical.
Exactly. So what makes this Opzelura cream so special?
Well, Opzelura is a highly effective, targeted JCAIN inhibitor cream. Janus kinases, or JKs, are basically enzymes that trigger inflammation.
Okay.
And that inflammation and immune response is what attacks the skin's pigment in vitiligo patients.
So how does the cream work?
By applying cream that inhibits those specific enzymes locally, right on the skin, you stop the attack at the source.
And here is where the financial engine we talked about earlier really shines.
Oh, absolutely. The cost difference is huge.
In North America, a year's supply of Opzelura might cost between $8,600 and $12,900.
Which is steep.
Very. But if a patient couldn't get that cream locally, they might have to rely on systemic injectable drugs like Dupixent.
Right, which suppress much broader parts of the immune system.
Exactly. And those injectables can cost over $26,000 a year.
Yeah. So by utilizing the zero tariff policy in Lecheng, patients are accessing this targeted cream for significantly less than the North American baseline.
Saving thousands of dollars while completely avoiding the heavy, full-body side effects of an injectable immunosuppressant.
It's a win-win for those patients.
We've covered hardware and topical treatments, but
Yeah.
really the ultimate draw of Lecheng is oncology.
Oh, without a doubt. Cancer treatments are the main driver.
Specifically, CAR-T and stem cell therapies for solid tumors. Let me try to explain the mechanics of CAR-T because it literally sounds like science fiction.
Go for it. It really does.
Doctors extract a patient's own immune T cells, take them into a lab, and genetically modify them to produce special structures called chimeric antigen receptors.
Right.
They essentially train the cells to recognize and attack the specific cancer, multiply them by the millions, and then infuse them back into the patient as a living drug.
It's mind-blowing. But because that process is entirely bespoke to the individual's DNA, the manufacturing costs are astronomical.
Yeah, I saw that in the US or Europe, a course of cellular therapy can easily exceed $1 million.
Easily. But China has aggressively scaled this technology. They actually currently lead the world with over 1,580 CAR-T clinical trials.
And that sheer volume of research, combined with the zone's specialized infrastructure, means the costs in Lecheng are 50 to 70% lower than in Western medical systems.
Yeah, a full course of high-end stem cell therapy runs about $110,000 there.
Which is still a lot of money, but compared to $1 million, it's a massive financial discount.
It is. But the source material issues a very stark warning here regarding the gray market.
Right. Tell me about that.
International patients seeking cell therapies must stick strictly to the commercial special route inside Lecheng, or participate in official academic trials at major public hospitals.
Because if you step outside those highly regulated zones, you risk falling into the hands of unregulated private biotech clinics.
Precisely. And the private gray market lacks the rigorous genetic quality control required to make these living therapies safe.
Which is terrifying when you're dealing with genetically modified cells.
Exactly. A contaminated or poorly engineered batch of T cells can trigger a fatal immune response.
As I was reading through these incredible treatments and the massive discounts, a huge question kept popping into my head.
What was that?
Why are these massive global pharmaceutical companies willing to launch their crown jewels, like their newest, most advanced drugs, in this tiny 9 square kilometer zone?
Does seem odd at first glance.
Right, because the revenue from a few 100,000 medical tourists is basically a rounding error for Big Pharma.
It is, but what's fascinating here is that the pharmaceutical companies aren't actually chasing the tourism dollars.
Oh, they are?
No, they are mining a highly valuable, intangible resource, real-world data, or RWD.
Oh, right. I noticed in the sources that Lecheng is the only place in China where everyday patient records are legally converted into real-world evidence by the NMPA.
Yes, electronic medical records, imaging, daily side effect logs, all of it.
And to understand why that's so valuable, you have to look at how drugs are usually approved.
It's normally a brutal process.
A pharmaceutical company typically has to run an entirely new, localized, double-blind clinical trial for the Chinese market.
Right, they have to recruit perfect healthy subjects, control every variable, and spend millions of dollars over several years.
But in Lecheng, these drugs are already being legally administered to diverse, real-world patients who have complex comorbid conditions.
Exactly. So the Chinese regulators are allowing the observational data generated from these actual hospital treatments to count toward the national approval process.
But they don't just take the hospital's word for it, right?
No. The NMPA evaluates this data on 6 strict dimensions. Things like representativeness, completeness, traceability, and accuracy.
And when it works, it is spectacular for the drug companies.
Remember the Opsilura vitiligo cream we talked about?
Yeah.
Because the zone collected pristine, multidimensional data from 7,000 patients treated in Lecheng, the drug completely bypassed an entire year of localized clinical trials.
Wow. 1 whole year saved.
Yeah, it received full Chinese market approval on January 30, 2026.
That is massive for a pharma company. But, I have to pause and look at the ethics of this for a second.
Oh, absolutely. It's a valid concern.
If these massive drug companies are subsidizing costs to lure patients into Lecheng just to harvest their medical data to unlock a billion-person market,
I know where you're going with this.
aren't these desperate international patients essentially paying to be lab rats?
I completely understand why it feels transactional. But the lab rat comparison misses a crucial distinction between experimental and observational medicine.
Okay, clarify that for me.
These patients are not being injected with untested trial phase chemicals. They are receiving therapies that have already passed the rigorous safety and efficacy trials of the FDA or the EMA.
Ah, I see. So the data collection is just observing how a fully vetted drug performs in the wild.
Yes. And more importantly, the treatment happens under the ultimate safety net of elite multidisciplinary teams, or MDTs.
So they have the best doctors watching over them.
Exactly. The patients are receiving world-class care.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally changes the role of the patient.
It really does.
You are no longer just a passive consumer of healthcare who buys a pill. In this model, patients are active, vital participants in a global research and development loop.
Yeah, you trade your data to open the Chinese market, and in return, you get early access to a life-saving drug at a fraction of the cost.
It is a brilliant symbiosis of economics and science.
It really is.
Okay, so we have this incredible medical utopia, zero taxes, globally approved drugs, fast-tracked approvals, and a beautiful climate.
Sounds perfect, right?
It does. If I have a complex tumor in Sydney or Singapore, and I have the $110,000, why am I not booking a flight tomorrow?
Because the medical science is only half the battle.
Right.
The other half is a brutal administrative nightmare known as the last mile.
Oh, this part of the research stressed me out so much.
It's incredibly daunting.
Getting into Lecheng is like being handed a VIP ticket to an exclusive club, only to realize the bouncer only speaks a language you don't know, you don't have the right ID, and your credit card melts when you try to pay the cover charge.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
Imagine you finally raised the money for your stem cell treatment. You are physically exhausted from chemotherapy, and you think the hard part is over. Then you hit the visa office.
No, the visas. You need an S1 or S2 medical visa. S1 is for long-term stays over 180 days, and S2 is for short-term.
And the Chinese embassy isn't just going to hand that over because you feel sick.
Definitely not. You need an official, verified invitation from the Lecheng hospital. You need certified proof of your diagnosis from your home country.
And the financial audit is intense.
Very intense.
The government requires you to prove you have liquid funds in a bank account equal to 120% of the estimated medical costs.
Right, because they want absolute assurance that you will not drain local public medical resources.
And let's say you somehow pass the audit and finally land in Hainan.
Then you immediately run into the 24-hour police registration rule.
Which is just, so stressful.
If you are staying anywhere outside the actual hospital ward like a recovery hotel, you have exactly 24 hours to register your residence with the local police.
And failing to do so results in fines and potential visa cancellation.
Exactly.
Then you face the translation traps. The research points out that desperate patients will often spend thousands of dollars translating years' worth of daily temperature logs and generic nursing notes.
Which is entirely counterproductive and a total waste of money.
Why is that?
Well, the elite oncology specialists in Lecheng do not have time to read hundreds of pages of badly translated administrative notes.
Right. They need surgical precision.
They want certified, flawless translations of recent biopsies, high-res imaging reports, and drug histories showing exactly when a tumor became resistant to a specific therapy.
And legally, a standard translation isn't enough. The Chinese medical system often requires a Hague apostille.
Yeah, that catches a lot of people off guard.
For those unfamiliar, an apostille is basically a globally recognized legal notary stamp that proves an international document is authentic.
Without it, or consular certification, your home country biopsy might as well be a blank piece of paper.
It's wild, and even if your paperwork is flawless, you eventually hit what they call the digital wall.
The digital wall is a huge barrier for foreigners.
China operates on a highly advanced, cashless, deeply integrated digital infrastructure.
Yeah, but the hospitals in Lecheng run their kiosks, appointment systems, and pharmacy dispensaries exclusively on an 18-digit Chinese citizen ID format.
So if you are holding an Australian or Indonesian passport, you are completely locked out of the self-service machines.
You literally physically cannot print your own blood test results.
And paying for things is just as hard. If you try to swipe a foreign credit card for a $50,000 cancer drug, your home bank's fraud department will instantly block it.
Oh, every single time. And the local digital wallets like WeChat Pay or Alipay have strict transaction limits for unverified foreigners. This raises an important question, though. How does a patient whose body is actively failing them navigate a system that demands this level of administrative perfection?
Think about it. If you were fighting for your life, would you want to spend your limited energy arguing with an ATM, hunting down a notary for an apostille, or trying to bypass a digital kiosk?
Of course not. It's impossible.
And that is exactly why an entirely new cross-border industry has sprung up, the fixers.
Specifically, medical concierges and contract research organizations, or CROs.
The source highlights a logistical model pioneered by a group called MedBridge NZ.
Yeah, their approach is really interesting.
The report emphasizes a very strict boundary for MedBridge NZ, though. They do not give medical advice.
Right, they are not doctors.
They are logistical powerhouses designed to carry the administrative weight.
Because in cross-border medicine, administrative efficiency is literally a matter of life and death.
Exactly.
If a single translated document is rejected, it can delay an approval process by weeks, which is just long enough to close a patient's therapeutic window forever.
So these CROs handle the pre-auditing of the funds to ensure the visa clears. They manage that terrifying 24-hour police registration upon arrival.
They provide clinical-level bilingual translation too. Not just tourist translation, but medical-grade accuracy that doctors trust.
And they manage the local payment gateways so your credit card doesn't freeze at the pharmacy counter.
But their ability to bypass that 18-digit ID digital wall is really their greatest asset.
The source mentions an incredible logistical feat by this team. They successfully coordinated a highly complex 9-test physical examination for an international patient, guiding them through the entire digital and physical maze of the hospital in just 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours to navigate a foreign medical bureaucracy that usually takes days. That's unbelievable.
It really is. So what does this all mean? Let's take a step back.
Oh,
We've looked at how Boao Lecheng has essentially hacked the timeline of global medicine.
yeah, they're using zero-tariff economics and the massive leverage of real-world data to trade market access for life-saving speed.
They took the agonizing weight of drug lag and engineered an entire jurisdiction that solves it.
It is a triumph of logistics, policy, and law.
And for you listening, even if you don't need a cochlear implant or cellular therapy today, understanding this model is a masterclass in how policy innovation can physically alter the boundaries of human health.
It is inspiring.
Yeah.
But, it also leaves us with a profound, lingering question to consider.
What's that?
As medical borders begin to dissolve for those who can afford the travel and hire specialized concierges to navigate the bureaucracy,
Yeah.
are we moving toward a future where your passport and your fixer are just as critical to your survival as your DNA?
Wow.
Yeah. What does that mean for the future of global health equality?
It really makes you think. Because at the end of the day, knowing a blockbuster drug exists doesn't matter if you can't get past the bouncer at the clinic door.
Exactly.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.
Until next time.